In this video, I'm going to answer the question of who is the leader, the producer or the director? And make sure you stick around until the end because I'm going to give you some best tips on how to structure a relationship between a director and a producer to ensure that you get the best out of the relationship, but also to get the best result for the film. All right, so let's jump in and talk about really who is the leader between these two very important people of a film project. Well, before we start, I just want to clarify that I'm talking about a lead producer here. So I'm not talking about an associate producer or a co-producer or an executive producer or any other type of producer. I'm really talking about that core producer who is leading the project and is really the lead producer on the set. So interestingly, the relationship between a director and producer is quite unique. So I was trying to think about, well, what are some similar relationships out there, maybe in different industries, that I could use to show how they were, operated in a similar way. But really, it was hard to find them. So it's not similar to a CEO and a COO relationship. In that relationship, you have someone who is essentially the strategy and the vision, that's a CEO, and someone who's running the day-to-day, and that's a COO. But ultimately, all the major decisions are going to be made by the CEO. And that's a little bit different for the reasons that I'm going to take you through in this video, where with a producer and a director, that decision-making kind of ebbs and flows between the two. It's also different to a founder and an investor. In that relationship, the investor's really just handing over the money and is giving some advice, maybe some access to networks and contacts, holding them accountable. But really, the founder is the one who is then going and executing their vision. It's also different to something like a developer and a builder, right? Again, a developer has the money and is simply hiring the builder to execute the project. So I really was struggling to find any other scenario that was similar to this producer-director relationship, because ultimately both of these people have a vision for the film and they're both executing that vision simultaneously. And it's that simultaneous execution of the vision of each of their visions and their joint vision that ultimately is able to produce the film. So with all that in mind, then who is the leader? Well, it really does depend. And there is this kind of fluidity to leadership on a film. So on set, it's very much the director who is the leader. And I think it's the role of the producer to ensure that the director is not just seen as the leader, but has that authority to actually be the leader. Because otherwise, the cast and crew, they're not going to really perform at the highest level if they don't trust in that director's vision, if they don't trust in the director's authority, and if they don't trust in the director's decision making. And if all of those things don't happen, then you're not going to get the best film. So really, what I see the producer's role during the production is really a facilitator. They're facilitating the vision of the director, and the director is the one that is leading. But interestingly, behind the scenes, the producer really does need to lead. So the producer is looking at the film holistically at all times and is dealing with the various stakeholders. And those stakeholders really do see the producer as the leader of the project. So when we're talking about financiers, distributors, investors, they're all expecting the producer to be in charge, and they're expecting the producer to lead this project from that inception all the way through to the release of the film. So you have this interesting dynamic where both the director and the producer are leading, and both of them are needing to have decision-making authority, and both of them are needing to be able to execute their vision separately and jointly in order to make this film. So it's really quite unique. I'm not sure that there's anything else out there that's like it. If you can think of anything, drop it in the comments. But I couldn't come up with anything. So what's also interesting about this relationship is, like I mentioned, there is fluidity to it. So at times, depending on who they're speaking to, what time of the production it is, the director or the producer might need to assume different roles. So they may need to assume that leadership role at different times. Maybe in the event of a crisis on set, the producer may need to step into that leadership role, whereas, as I just said, really it's a director who's a leader on set. So the context of actually what's happening at a particular point in time can also dictate who is leading or who is assuming that leadership role. And sometimes, the producer and director might need to play good cop, bad cop, right? Sometimes it makes more sense for the producer to exercise more decision-making authority, while other times it makes more sense for the director to. So that is a bit of an explanation of who actually leads on a production. Now, because there is this shared responsibility, I think it's really important to set up the relationship between the producer and the director in the best way in order to get the most out of it. So now I want to give you some tips of how you can structure that relationship based on off the way that I've been doing it for really since I started, and how I intend to keep doing it. So the first is that it's important to separate church and state. So what I mean by that is, if you can separate the creative versus the financial decision making, I think that's a really easy and clear way to define the role, the responsibility, and also the decision making authority. So if the director has final say over the creative, has final cut, and the producer has final say over the financial decisions that need to be made, then that's a really clear and easy way for that to avoid conflict between the two, but B, just also have a really clear understanding of what each of them is responsible for. So that's the first thing I would do. And it's important that that is reflected in the agreement. Second thing is to really go into it as partners. Because this is such a close and unique relationship, I think it's important for the two people to be equals. And what that means is, equal fees, equal profit share, equal ownership. So, this could be different if a producer is the one who has come up with the project and is simply hiring a director to come on board the project. In that case, you may not have this exact kind of 50-50 split or this partnership. But if we're talking about earlier on in each of their careers, it could be the first few films where you're really coming into it as a team, then I think it's important to treat each other as equals and for that to be reflected in the agreement. The next one is to simply respect each other, right? And that just goes to basic, it's really just how you treat each other, not just as professionals, but as humans. I think that's really important. If there's a level of respect that always exists between the two of you and you don't cross any lines that shouldn't be crossed, then that's going to facilitate a really good relationship, and it's going to allow for that kind of fluidity of decision making and of leadership. And then the last one is to simply be accountable. So it's to do what you say you're both going to do. Because if you do that, again, you will be respecting each other and you'll trust each other, and then you're going to get the most out of that relationship. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe, drop your comments in the comment section below, and I'll see you on the next one.